The prime goal of government is to protect the minority of the opulent from the majority. And in order to do that, you've got to fragment the majority so they really can't get together and do very much. And you have to concentrate power in the wealth of the nation.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's Michael Malice here, and let that be your welcome for the next hour. We have today a guest that I wanted to have him wait until he got to New York, and I said, wait, no, it's been too long. We got to get you on as soon as possible. We have the legend himself, Rucka Rucka Ali, parody artist, rapper, pundit. He's one of the few people who, when he gives me advice, I shut up and listen. So I have super respect for Rucka. He just hit 1 million subscribers on YouTube. And if that number is hard for you to imagine subscribing once 1 million times. Rucka's, well, go ahead. What are you going to say?
When I press the button with my finger, you'll know it's Kim Jong-un. That was that intro song of yours. I never heard that song.
Oh, Un.
Whatever. It rhymes with what that girl was saying, or guy, or whatever. I don't know. You can't really distinguish between them anymore. But anyway, get on to the show. You're introducing me. Hey, great to be here. Love the new studio.
It's 9:30 in the morning in Los Angeles, and you are pretty awake, huh?
Hell yeah.
What's your sleep schedule like, by the way? Because I go to bed at 2 and I wake up at 11.
No, I'm a bit more conservative than that. I tend to get kind of tired at like 11 or midnight and wake up around 7. Exercise, you know. Yeah. I'm a hardworking entrepreneur.
Yeah. So wait. So you just hit 1 million subscribers. That's a really huge deal. I mean, that's like almost as many votes as Gary Johnson got in the election or something.
There are many ways why I have surpassed Gary Johnson, and that is one of them. It's YouTube in the past. I actually have 1 million subscriber special video that I can't release yet because YouTube put me on timeout for a couple weeks. That's a topic. Yeah, YouTube. We're frenemies. We
love-hate relationship.
Yeah, it's yeah. So the basic theme of the video is just kind of showing you a montage of all the times I had to announce that I have a new channel because YouTube deleted, the last one. So it's been an interesting journey. But this current biggest channel I have, It's Rucka, up since 2011. Knock on glass. And it's very, very excited. Congratulations to all the subscribers. Congratulations to me. Congratulations to you, honestly. Well, everyone should really pat themselves on the back for this. We got 1 million subscribers.
So what was weird about hanging out and talking to you is I didn't realize you're like a regular. Well, I don't want to say regular, but I don't want to say normal either because neither of us are regular or normal. You're really, really talented. And it's really kind of weird for me when you talk to people and you realize, holy shit, this guy's got some skills. So I mean, to break out as like a parody artist, it's not an easy thing because everyone thinks that they're talented at it. Like, did you ever study music?
I mean, I took like guitar lessons, I guess. So that's like studying music. I learned a little bit of music theory, I guess. But I liken myself to Tarantino. I took a course on Tarantino at my local community college when I was in school, and people would ask him, did you go to film school? And he said, no, I went to films.
Right.
That's me.
Music is something. Yeah, I love your records. Music is something that I wouldn't know how. Is it the computer? Are there programs now that help people write music to the point where you don't have to have an actual music background?
So I mean, I've always worked with the producer as far as the technical side of it. So I don't create the instrumentals. I don't. No, so in that sense, I'm what people would call untalented. But lyrically, like the lyrics, the writing, the delivery, the voice, that's me.
So one of your videos that's my favorite is Zayn did 9/11, right? About Zayn Malik from One Direction. Was that your first song?
I can't confirm if Zayn Malik has anything to do with that. But yes, that is an excellent song. I'm glad it's your favorite.
Oh wait, hold on. He's in the video though throughout.
Well, but as you can read in the beginning, all celebrity similarities are coincidental.
Okay,
or
sure.
parodic.
So wait,
What?
so you've gotten backlash from this video, which is absolutely hilarious and clearly parodic.
That video. It got so big. It was like the One Direction fans on Twitter were sending me tweets by the thousands every second. And literally One Direction's lawyers got involved to the point where the song was just pulled from the internet, but it's obviously made its way back up. But it got so big that I realized, like, that's it. Like, that's as big as a joke can really get without, I mean, like that's it. It's like without a black hole opening.
No, the biggest the joke can get is the White House. Because, I mean, the tweets from the president, I mean, these things are... I mean, to have the president be tweeting things, referring to himself as your favorite president, and then parentheses, me, this is just something on a whole other level. No, but wait, so tell that process, because there's so much discussion right now about internet censorship, and you're obviously in this little bit of a gray area, right? So if they had their way, like, obviously One Direction's lawyer, how dare you put this out there, even though it's clearly parodic. What was the process? How'd you get it reinstated?
I didn't.
What do you mean? It's on the internet.
Yeah, well, it's on YouTube because someone
Right.
posted it there, but like I didn't release the song.
Oh, I see how it is. Oh, okay. Got it. Okay. So Zayn Hussein did 9/11. Rucka Rucka Ali did not do Zayn Hussein did 9/11. So
I wrote and released the video originally, which I guess I'm admitting to that. But once it got so big and like lawyers got involved, I just said, all right, I'm done.
Oh, so it's not on your channel.
No, it's not. That's my point.
I didn't understand. Okay, okay. So is that weird when you're like you're some guy in your house, you're making a funny video, and you hear from these big shot entertainment lawyers? That's got to be scary.
It was quite an interesting day. It was like exciting and also like what these people can ruin your. I mean, these guys get paid hundreds of dollars or thousands a minute, right? These are high-powered entertainment lawyers. If they decide they don't want you to live, they can end your life.
Yeah, I had a friend who was an editor, I forget what publishing house, and I think she had a book deal, and I think it was One Direction, and they had a contract and so on, everything was going to go out, and then she got a call from the lawyer one day, and he goes, you know that book deal? Yeah, it doesn't exist, and like click, and she's like, okay. So what did you do as a response, if you're allowed to talk about it?
I don't know if I'm allowed. I think I'm allowed to talk about it. I did nothing. I just I told my friends about it. I was like, wow, that escalated. And I mean, what would you do about it? I was busy writing the next song. I don't fucking, it's like, what am I supposed to do about it?
Well, no, when something I'm doing hits and goes big, I'm not thinking about the next thing. I'm enjoying the moment, and I'm kind of riding the ride and surfing that wave. So I would be freaking out. I would be scared. I would be like, is this how it's going to be for the rest of my career? Those would be the thoughts that would be going through my head.
Yeah, so I understand that. So certainly I've had that. So basically in 2008, I found a certain degree of success creating viral content. And that was obviously very exciting. And I said, wow, finally I'm good at something. Yeah. Finally, I found something to do. And then I had one of my... In that first year, really, in the first like 6 or 9 months, I had a song called Ching Chang Chong, and it was blowing up, and I was excited, and this was the summertime, and it was the summer jam, and the kids around the world and around the country were going around singing Ching Chang Chong, and YouTube deleted the video.
Okay.
And I said, what? This was back when you could like email someone and they might actually respond, and the guy responded, yeah, oh yeah, it looks like you violated our community guidelines for hate speech. Wow. So I think I even replied to it like, oh, come on, that's preposterous, and try to making the point, but obviously nobody cared. But I had to accept that that's just the world. I mean, that's it. The internet is a place where you can reach the entire world, but it can be pulled away at any time. But there is a certain degree of osmosis where kind of like your work will get out there. So I basically had to eat that in my mind. I said, all right, you know what? I'll grieve today, and then it's back to the drawing board, and there'll be other hits. But then the next day I happened to look up the song, kind of like when you're in denial, like somebody just died, but you want to believe maybe they're still there. So I looked up Ching Chang Chong on YouTube, and suddenly I see there's like 10 uploads of it.
Okay. And
I said, oh, okay, it is out there. It's just, it was my upload was deleted, but it's
Right.
out there. So if you look me up on YouTube, there's like an ungodly selection of my videos kind of spread all over the internet now. So I got this like weird cult status where like no one even knows where to find me anymore.
So I'm almost scared to ask this because I don't want to like put the bad energy out there. But like, are you following this stuff with like Alex Jones and Gavin and all these people and how they're getting pulled without notice? And is that something that you're kind of living in fear about?
A little. Well, I'm not really living in fear about it. I don't think the people that hate those guys hate me the same way.
Okay.
But you know, I don't want to speak too soon.
Right.
You never know these days. But I don't think I'm in the same kind of.
I don't think you're.
I don't think I'm in the same category because
not
I'm
at
not
all.
seen as like this. Yeah, like
But
But I'm a little bit following it.
Yeah, what it
a little
illustrates.
bit following it.
Yeah, what it illustrates. What I'm obviously you're not in the same. You're not. You know, the SPLC is not after you, obviously. But what I mean is, what that kind of could be a slippery slope is. First, you come for the guys who are saying things that are, let's say, objectively inappropriate. Then you're coming from the guys whose humor is the kind that's not our kind of humor. You know, so in air quotes. And the thing is, the fact that it happens without warning, and the fact that it's coordinated across different platforms, that to me is the disturbing element to it.
It is disturbing, and I might one day have that happen to me, but I don't really see how there's anything I can do about it other than just continue to make the content that I want to make. And as long as I have a platform to release it. And there's really nothing else I can do about any of this. That, you know, this stuff happens.
So you also sat down like I had with Dave Rubin, and actually, I take back what I said. My favorite video of yours is not Zayn did 9/11. It's the guys video you made of what I think was the best internet moment of 2017, which is Candace Owens, who I've described last week in my interview with John Stossel as the Ayn Rand of our time, and Blair White, and them going ham. And you took that video and made it guys. It's absolutely hilarious. You know, Dave has a little cameo at the end. That was just, I mean, amazing.
Well, thank you. So can you explain what you mean by Candace Owen being the Ayn Rand of our time?
Yes, it's irony. Have you ever followed anything she said?
A little bit. So, okay. So it was an ironic statement. Okay.
Yeah, her big...
Sorry for being a normie.
Yeah. Her big issues are things like if you go to black people and tell them that they're on a plantation, they're going to stop voting Democrat and vote Republican, and America is going to be saved, which is, I think, clearly the Twitter version of the Galt speech.
All right.
I think it's fair to say. So one of the things you were talking about on Rubin is you consider yourself an objectivist. Which is, for people who don't know, Ayn Rand was not just the author of a series of vampire novels, most famously Dracula. She was also a philosopher, and she had a philosophy called objectivism. I own her copy of The Fountainhead, first edition, pat on the back. Did you get any heat from that? Because when I talk about being heavily influenced by Rand, the point I always make is that there's a certain percent of the population, bigger than 10%, less than 50%, who view liking Rand as akin to being a Scientologist.
I don't have those statistics in front of me, but I know she's widely read. I know many people have read her novels, and in the intellectual circles, her name is treated like a lol cow. People laugh at her if you bring her up. But in the realm of very successful people, I think there's a much higher ratio of people who may respect her, but maybe Scientology also gets similar respect among very successful people.
Certainly in Hollywood, you're going to have a Scientologist.
Yes, I don't have those numbers about like 10% or 50%, but I always figured if I ever do kind of come out of the objectivist closet, I might be treated with a certain level of hostility. But what I didn't take into account back then was the fact that the people who would even know who I am have a certain level of respect for my lack of giving a fuck.
Okay.
And there is an implicit desire people have to when they look at somebody they admire in some way, they kind of want what this person have. They kind of want to know some of their secrets. Like, you know, well, so I think because a lot of people look up to me, you know, because of the amount of shit posting I've done and the amount of Jimmies I've rustled, as they would say.
It's very admirable.
I'm not joking. Yeah. No, so a lot of people, I think, were like more curious. They're like, oh, wow, okay, interesting. A lot of people have emailed me and said, hey, I read Rand because of you, and thank you. And yeah, you're going to have those dismissive, but I have such little respect for people who dismiss Rand, like these neckbeards, the skeptic community. These people are so, they're just, it's like they're clinging to lack of knowledge. They're like clinging to uncertainty. So why would I even be concerned with these guys? The question is, do I want what they have? Right? I don't want what these people have. It's like they're not. It's if these guys were living great lives and doing all kinds of cool shit, that would be one thing. But these types of people are not. Maybe I'm generalizing, but go ahead and
no.
share
I
your
think
thoughts.
you almost basically quoted Rand yourself, because there's this scene in The Fountainhead where where one of the characters, who I didn't even realize was the villain until I got 3/4 of the way through The Fountainhead, because of how she wrote it. Because in basic terms, this person would be the hero, because he's like so Ellsworth Toohey is talking to the protagonist Howard Rourke, and he goes, "Now that we're by ourselves, tell me, what do you think of me?" And he goes, "But I don't think of you." So obviously that is, and the other thing which I think you've done is there has been a stereotype, which I think, and I want to hear your thoughts if this stereotype is justified. There is a humorlessness that's typically been associated with Rand, her circle, and with objectivism. Do you think that's a valid appraisal?
I don't know enough about Rand. I would say her, what she contributes in my world, like what she has contributed, it's like, she to me is like up there with the person who invented fire and the first person to draw something on the cave wall, which is a conceptual leap in mankind's history. So, I mean, to me, like, but like, did she have a sense of humor? I didn't know her. I imagine she was more lighthearted, maybe, than people might imagine by reading her work, in the same way that people who see my work might not imagine how serious I am about the things that matter to me. So the movement, I guess, probably justifiably is sort of known to have kind of a dry side to it. But even there, I think people would be surprised once they get close to a lot of these people and say, oh, wow, they're more approachable than I thought. At least I'll speak for like today's scene. But I have plenty of thoughts about like the movement, and should there be a movement, and what should it be like, and stuff like that. So I definitely, I think there is an evolution that ought to take place, and people like me kind of showing up in the culture, somebody with a catalog, somebody with a body of work and a certain degree of influence and a certain interesting story, saying, this was the life I was handed at birth, and I made certain decisions to get to where I am today. Those types of people sort of stepping up and saying, here's what objectivism means in my life. And I'm not really that interested in convincing you, but if you're interested, do this or go away. I think that's kind of the vision I have for a movement, if there ought to be one. That's kind of the future I'm starting to picture.
Michael Malice here. I want to tell you about Infinite CBD. It offers the cleanest, healthiest, and purest form of CBD available. So what's CBD? Well, it's 100% legal. It's a natural ingredient taken from hemp plants, and it helps your body's endocannabinoid system, and it keeps it balanced. Basically, it gives you all the benefits of marijuana, but you're not getting high. And research shows CBD has helped people who have chronic pain, inflammation, anxiety, and all sorts of other things. They offer a variety of products at infinitecbd.com to make sure you can enjoy CBD the way you prefer, including capsules, vape juice, and gummies. Who doesn't like gummies? So here's some things that they have. If you take the CBD gummies, that's infinitecbd.com, it calms you down. It's great for anxiety. It helps you fall asleep. You take the topical cream, right? You've got an injury. You've got sore muscles. It's plain and simple. You put it on stuff that hurts. It stops hurting. Easy. You have CBD AM. They're the CBD pills with caffeine. It's great for when you need to focus, be calm. If you want to get some writing done, you're on deadline, take the CBD AM. So if you go to infinitecbd.com and use promo code WELCOME15, you get 15% off. So infinitecbd.com, it's legal, and Welcome15 will get you 15% off any purchase. Yeah, so let me give an example of Rand being humorless and then Rand being hilarious. So one is when Atlas Shrugged came out in 1957, all her friends threw her a surprise party. The editors were there, her whole crew was there, and her husband just said, oh, I'm taking you out to a fancy dinner. And she shows up to this ballroom, and everyone yells out, surprise! And Rand goes, I do not approve of surprises. And then she wrote this whole essay about how, what's the point? Why does it add any value to have surprises? So something like that, which is, I think she must have been, to some extent, I'm not saying this in a nasty way, there's a little bit of her being on the spectrum, because that's just so kind of out there in terms of what's appropriate behavior. On the other hand, her being hilarious, she's on Donahue and she was attacking feminism, and she's just like, he's defending feminism, and she's just like, no, they're trying to be professional football players and longshoremen, and you have to have quotas, in order to have a certain amount of women. And he's like, well, what advice would you have for women? She goes, fight for your career, just like any man has had to fight for your career. And Donahue goes, would you fight for anything? And she goes, how did I get here? And this is in Madison Square Garden, and the audience bursts out laughing, and Donahue literally turns around and starts shaking his head at his own idiocy. So she did have, and there's a lot of humor, wry humor in certainly in The Fountainhead more than Atlas Shrugged, but she also felt if you're going to be humorous, it's in a sense of being unserious about ideas. And this to her fed into this kind of cynicism that like, oh, if you're joking around about like life and death and marriage and values, you're trying to destroy those values because you're not giving them the intensity that they deserve.
Yeah, so there's a lot there. So, well, I'll start with your last point. There is when you joke about something relating to marriage and love, it could come off like you're dismissing those values, right. or if you look a little closer, it's like, well, no, you're making fun of the dismissal. It's like you're satirizing someone who would dismiss those values. Yeah. But
like Archie Bunker was let me give you an example. Archie Bunker was the punchline. He wasn't like, you should look up to Archie Bunker. It's like, look at this buffoon saying these horrible things.
Yeah. So like for me, like to me, the idea that a person is an automaton, like that a person's actions and choices are predetermined, to me, that's funny. Like it's funny to me to like racial stereotypes are funny because yes, a lot of people do behave like stereotypes, but in my opinion, and it's evident to me through introspection, everyone has a choice to pause, to focus, and to choose what principles to follow. So like, to me, racial stereotypes are hilarious to turn people into these cartoon characters. Though I can see people have looked at my jokes and said on one hand, oh, he's saying racism is wrong. And other people said, oh, no, he's racist. I certainly, humor can be analyzed and it can be misinterpreted. I don't know. I mean, that's kind of disheartening to hear about the surprise party. Maybe a little bit of a cultural disconnect there between Rand and her American friends. But yeah, I mean, as far as being on the spectrum, I think the field of psychology is so young and in my opinion, still in the dark ages that it often intellectuals can be sort of seen as autistic. But like, I think there's kind of a lot to learn there. I'm not confident to kind of say who is and who's not on the spectrum. People probably would say I'm on the spectrum. Well, that's based on how much. Yeah.
That's a given. No, I actually have like every book written by and about her up to a certain point. So I was deep into her stuff. I think she's enormously interesting, enormously important. And the way I always phrase it is that Rand does not have all the answers, but she has all the questions. And for people who are scared of her, my point, what I take away from her, which I think is the most important thing, is her insistence. Like, she will not budge an inch on this, that your life matters, your life has value, that you should treasure your life, make something of yourself. You have all these opportunities and live your life to the fullest. And, this is what she calls egoism. And when, she's often caricatured, and she's easy to caricature because she's very extreme in certain ways, and she's a big personality. So the bigger the personality, the easier it is to lampoon someone. But this idea that like, you got one shot, do something with it. Like, when you meet your maker, haha, she's a big atheist, but when you meet your maker, are you going to be able to look back and say, you know what? I did the best I could. I fought hard for my values. And my happiness mattered to me, and my life mattered to me. I think that's an extremely not only important message, but at this point, I don't think it's a very controversial one if you put in those terms.
No, it's not controversial, and I mean that's a great thing to take away from what she's saying. So like, where do you part ways with her then?
I think I part ways. Obviously, as you know, I'm an anarchist. I think a lot of her views on so she had a lot of wacky views, and I don't think you would disagree that they're wacky because the Ayn Rand Institute, which is basically founded by her heir Leonard Peikoff, they did a job of like sorting out like this. Her views on this are actual objectivism, the philosophy of objectivism, and her views on this are like her personal idiosyncrasies. So, for example, she had an essay about why she wouldn't vote for a woman president. And her point of view is that is a woman's nature to look up to man, and to have a woman in charge of the armed forces she regarded as an obscenity. I think that was the word she actually used. Now, and at the very end of her first Donahue appearance, a woman got up in the audience, and Rand was being so strong women. All her books have extremely strong women, like way before her time, and she's not doing it for feminist reasons because she was living it, right? So the woman asked her, "How would you feel about a woman in the White House as president?" And Rand goes, "I wouldn't vote for her." And the woman goes, "You wouldn't? No." And then she's like, "Even if it got to the point where she's better qualified for the man," and Rand goes, "If it got that low, I might." So,
if we ever stoop that low.
Yeah. So that is very, to me, hard to defend, especially because in her lifetime, Margaret Thatcher became prime minister, and she was a Thatcher admirer, and she was pleased that Thatcher was reading her works seriously. And Thatcher with the Falklands was a great example. There's a great 2 clips of Thatcher with the Falklands from the Iron Lady movie, which is minarchism at its best. Her point being like, we will defend these very few Englishmen in a little island off the coast of Argentina because we're going to stand on principle. So I think that's an example of where I'd part ways with Rand. I think, I think again, they're not. She's often dismissive of things she doesn't like in one sentence. For example, she dismissed all of ancient Egypt.
All right. Well, hold on, because you just said one thing, and let's address that. So I don't think her view on psychology with relating to gender is the essence of her philosophy, and she could have been right. By the way,
it's not the essence of her philosophy. No, there's no question about that.
Right.
You're 100% correct.
You got the basics, basically existence, reason, rational egoism, capitalism. Like that's her philosophy. So something she said about something as complicated as gender and sex and leadership in politics, I think even with everything, even she would see that there's a lot. I mean, she did say this. I think there's a lot left to learn. About psychology. So I think to focus on like her personality or maybe her application of objectivism to a particular issue, whether it's women in politics or homosexuality, I don't see. And now you're about to tell me how she was too dismissive of things she didn't like. I'm asking, where do you disagree with her philosophy?
Well, I mean, this is the whole point. So there was 2 ways of looking at objectivism, right? There's the objectivism. Objectivism, it means that which Rand said and wrote in her books. Or objectivism is those big 4 things, and everything else are interpretations, and in which she herself could be wrong. So these are 2 approaches to objectivism. If we're going to the second one, it's the big 4, then I agree with her. Except I don't agree with her on politics because I am an anarchist. But if you're looking at it as objectivism is that which everything she said, there are certain things she said. You asked me where I parted company with her. So there are certain things she said which I don't think are necessarily central to her thinking whatsoever. But there are certainly things that I would strongly disagree with. For example, I'll give you 2 examples which are not in any sense central to her philosophy. In one of her books, she dismisses horror stories, that brand of genre fiction, as being driven by people who think reality is like inherently depraved. And then she also dismisses ancient Egypt as a civilization which went unchanged for thousands of years. Neither of these things I agree with, and even if they were true, it would take more than a sentence to kind of unpack them. Neither of them are at all even close to essential to her worldview.
Right. I mean, so were the ancient Egyptians doing all kinds of great things when they were dedicating their resources and building these pyramids as shrines to the dead?
I will prove it to you in one sentence. Rand's book, The Fountainhead, is about architecture. The Great Pyramid at Giza was the tallest building on Earth until the 1800s. So that is an engineering marvel. Regardless, yes, it's about the dead, but in terms of technology, that is an amazing, amazing accomplishment that stood for literally thousands of years.
That is a very impressive. I still don't know how they built those pyramids.
Yeah, I don't think I do either. But that's an accomplishment. Okay. I mean, the fact that we still go there and look at them after thousands of years says something.
I mean, okay, a lot of cultures have done all kinds of magnificent things in as far as cultural products. Philosophies were not life affirming and not rational.
Certainly not the Egyptians, correct.
Right. So I think that was her point. And other than this, the pyramids, which were developed with the intention of celebrating death, what have they invented in those 3,000?
Hieroglyphs, their art, how they wrote.
Okay.
To have a written language, to have calligraphy, to have all sort. They had a priestly caste, so they had some kind of structure in society. Now, obviously, I'm not in favor of a priestly caste, but they did, and they also, if you look at, this is again like 3,000 years, 4,000 years culture. Their art changed over history. There are many innovations and changes throughout time. Sculpture, weaving. I mean, all the fact that so many of the things that they physically created are still with us, I think, cannot be dismissed. But again, the fact that it's in one sentence, even if she's right, I mean, that is, to me, is overly dismissive. But again, this is in no way central to her thinking.
Yeah, that was in an essay about monuments. She wrote a short essay about...
it's in the For the New Intellectual.
Okay. She also mentioned in a little bit more detail, the slaves being forced to die while building these pyramids, as just to build a monument to the whims of their leaders. And she equated that to modern day monuments, public monuments being funded by forced taxation. So, like you said, it's not essential to her philosophy. And yeah, she wrote a whole book, a series of essays, The Romantic Manifesto, about art, which, like you mentioned, horror, and she had an opinion on horror and So I was curious about Egypt, but obviously maybe not the best use of our valuable time. So, but like as far as the philosophy itself, to me, the meaning of her philosophy, like the essence of it, is in the personal realm, and it's in man as a heroic being, and it's in free will, and it's in the ability of the individual to look inward and make his inner world as meaningful as what he's able to accomplish externally. So I'm not pointing to the objectivist movement and the Ayn Rand Institute and Peikoff. I'm not pointing at anyone. I'm not even pointing at Rand's concrete life itself. I'm pointing to what it is that I get from reading The Fountainhead and
I agree completely.
And learning the nuts and bolts of her epistemology as I am now. To me, the non-contradictory element of her philosophy, to me, is remarkably unusual. So, like, is there a contradiction in there that I missed? I guess that's my real question. Is there something that so I'm not asking really where you part ways with her company. I'm asking more about the philosophy itself. Well,
first of all, we got a correction from the chat room, which is the Great Pyramid was the biggest until the year 1300, when the Lincoln Cathedral was built. So, thank you for the correction from the chat room. Where I part ways with her company, do you prefer The Fountainhead to Atlas Shrugged like I do?
Depends which one I'm reading, but yeah, I guess The Fountainhead really is like a deeply psychological book.
Yeah, so the difference is Rand is so kind of in our culture tied in with politics, and like often like with people like Paul Ryan, which is just, she would regard as absolutely demented and have nothing to do with her. And Paul Ryan has also made a point to distance himself from her. Atlas Shrugged is about politics. Politics is not in Fountainhead. Fountainhead is about ethics and how a guide to live your life and to have integrity and the importance of that. So in that sense, I'm not parting company here with her in the slightest. In my biography, Ego and Hubris, there was just I remember this very distinctly, and I'll tell this story again because the book's hard to find. It's $60 on the black market now, or the secondhand market. I was working at Goldman Sachs. This was in 2000, and my great-grandmother had passed away. And my grandmother wanted me to have Thanksgiving dinner with her. And I said, sure. And we're Russian. Thanksgiving's not this a big holiday for us, but I promised her. And I was doing help desk, which was 24/7. And they said, well, even though I was working second shift, which was 4 p.m. to midnight, they said, well, for Thanksgiving Day, we're going to have you come in second shift or whatever. And I go, no, I can't. Oh no, she wanted lunch. They wanted me to come in for lunch. And I said, I work second shift normally, and I'm not coming in for lunch. I'm having lunch with my grandmother. And they said, well, you have to come in. And I knew this was one of those like movie moments, like, which are you going to choose? And I also knew if I asked my grandma, can we have dinner? She'd be fine with it. But I'm like, I made a promise. Someone just died. Am I going to change my plans for the sake of this demonic company? And I said, no. And they said, well, if you don't come in, you're going to get fired. And I'm like, all right. And I was fired, and no regrets, just like the tattoo on my chest, RAGRETS. And I am so proud and that's what part of Rand's message is. it's people. One of the criticisms of her is that telling people to be selfish is like telling fish to swim in the water. It's like, no. What she means by selfishness is fight for your values. And often there will be a very heavy short-term cost or long-term cost or social cost. And this is something that it's the right thing to do, and you have to do it like though the heavens may fall. And that to me is the message of the Fountainhead, and something which I think is extremely important, because especially let's talk about friends. So many friends are not there and are willing to be like, oh, I'm not getting involved, I don't care. They're nice to talk to at a party, but like if your mom dies and you call them up, are they going to get on the cab and get to your house, or are they going to be like, oh, that's too bad, and they're going to keep going on with their day? That to me is the Randian message at its best.
What about friends not showing up? What is it?
Meaning, like, I don't. For example, if you value someone, right, and they're in a bad way, are you going to show it? Are you going to cancel whatever it is and be like, they're hurting, I'm going to go there and I'm going to see what I can to make them better, make it better for them, because this is someone who I value? Or is it going to be like, I'm busy, well, I hope it works out for them?
Okay, so I like what you took away from the Fountainhead. So when I read the Fountainhead, I was so blown away that anyone could even write this, and that the person who wrote this was such a living in a different universe than pretty much anyone I had ever met. And I really wanted to get to know, where's this person coming from? Like, what is her philosophy? And I still haven't done the research. I still haven't read books about her. I'm too busy reading what she actually wrote and what Peikoff wrote and kind of figuring out how to understand it and apply it to my own life and explain it in a way that relates. Like right now, I'm trying to apply it to addiction on my commentary channel, Rucka Reacts. I'm kind of doing a series, geared towards integrating these different elements of objectivism with recovery from addiction. So that is true. You got to fight for your values, and that is a great message to take away from the Fountainhead. But also, why is Rourke so consistent? Why does he have such integrity? What does he believe? And he is rational. So the way to be properly selfish is to be rational. And then what do we mean by rational? Philosophers have argued about this since Thales. What is reason, or is there such a thing as reason? And how do we use it? What's it for? Can we derive morality from the facts around us? So that to me is trying to find my inner Rourke. I want to understand everything that Rand was saying, and Atlas Shrugged is very useful in that. Even though it's mostly focused on politics or the political realm, it's also very much focused on the inner struggles of a character like Reardon. And it's focused on, in the Galt speech, he's talking epistemology. He's saying existence is identity and consciousness is identification. Those are powerful, true statements that, trying to contradict those axioms creates inner contradictions, which is kind of something I'm exploring in my commentary series. So I guess I don't know if there's a question now or a statement, but to me, it's I want that. I read the Fountainhead. I want to understand it fully, and I want to have it.
So here, okay, let's talk a little bit, because when someone is a admirer of Rand, which I certainly am, you get protective of her because she's so attacked, she's so vilified, and it's often vilified not for the correct reasons, but I'm going to invent a caricature, then I'm going to attack that caricature, and it's you know what, address her on her ideas and her own terms, and then we got something, but you're not doing that, so it kind of gets me mad, because it's this person has clearly brought a lot of value to a lot of people's lives. So in that context, let that have the background. I think there is a very big downside to the Fountainhead, and it's this: the Rourke character, who's the hero of the book, on a subtle level, he is a very big loner, right? He does not have a lot of friends. He does not have romantic relationships. He's consciously and intentionally isolated from society, partly due to his integrity and his genius, but other things. And I think the fact that the Fountainhead is so often read when you're young, that's can have a very pernicious effect, because I'm a big introvert. I don't know if you are. Are you an introvert as well?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And
I don't want to be.
Right, but when you're a smart kid and you're an introvert and you become socially isolated at that young age, it's not going to put you in a happy place. And saying like, well, Rourke's having a good time, it's like, well, that's not helping me because now I'm alone and kind of isolated and scared.
Mm-hmm. So I think what you're describing is a misreading of the Fountainhead. That there was I think a point in maybe the 1980s where like certain objectivists were dyeing their hair orange to be more like Rourke. They were focused on non-essentials. Right. So Rourke, when I read it at 16, I was very much just kind of, wow, this guy really hangs out by himself a lot. I should be like that. Maybe I thought a little bit. Although I very much wanted friends as well, and I wanted to meet girls and all that. So there was this sort of inner conflict between this world Rand was offering versus what I wanted. But then first of all, I thought more about it. I worked on integrating these values and ideas for a long time. And then when I read it again at 27, I noticed this guy really likes his friends, the ones he likes, the one he picks out. Mallory, the one guy he meets at the construction site, Mike, his girlfriend, Wynand, which you would never suspect that would. So he has friends, and he comes to life around them. So I think you're right that many people could misread Rand's fiction. And it could take a long time to really understand what she was getting at. But now, when you read, like when I read Atlas, which I reread it recently, Francisco d'Anconia is another one of her heroes, and he's kind of like perfect from the beginning in a sense. Like he's not going through a struggle like Reardon is. Francisco's outgoing. He shows up to the party and just it's his party the minute he walks through the door. So. He's not friends with everyone. He also hand selects his friends, but like not every Randian hero, so to speak, is going to be sitting at home for long stretches of time. Sure. Working on his architecture.
But if the Fountainhead is telling you how you should live, and Atlas Shrugged is telling you how your country or society should be, right? It's very clear. No. What? No. Hold on.
Right off the bat.
Hold on a second. It's very clear in the Fountainhead who the role model is. There's just one guy. In Atlas Shrugged, you've got a bunch to choose from, right? So the thing is, it's very hard at 16, like you said, or I don't remember how old I was. I would know, it was first year in college, was 17 or 18. It's very hard to be able to parse things out. And that's what I'm saying. I agree with you that it is a misreading, but it's not an uncommon misreading. And that's a dangerous one. That's all I'm saying.
It can be. I still think someone reading The Fountainhead and kind of misunderstanding it is still better off and has a better chance at finding the truth if he's honest, if he's earnest.
Sure, I'm not denying that.
But I mean, look. So Rand wrote The Fountainhead with a certain theme in mind: the individual versus the collective. She wrote Atlas as more, I think, about like the ideal man going on strike against the moochers. Well, yeah, it is a spoiler. But yeah, I mean, I don't see it as like the Fountainhead tells you how to live and then Atlas tells you what political system to have or how society should be. No, they both present man as a heroic being. And I think you ought to be able to read these works of art and integrate it in a way that is consistent with your values. So someone like me, my Stoddard temple, so to speak, is Zayn Did 9/11, a song that Rand
that's more of your home.
Never would listen to.
No, that's more of a home for subnormal children.
Absolutely, yeah, that is that. But that's certainly who lives in the house.
Yeah.
AKA the people watching at home. But yeah, look, so the concretes are not going to be the same. So the fact that Rourke is a loner who kind of sits at home. By the way, so like Seth MacFarlane in the early days of his career was also sitting at home for weeks at a time working on his cartoon to try and pitch it. And that today he throws the biggest parties in Hollywood. There is a context. There was a time when every day, as soon as I got out of my job, I would either went to the studio to record a new song, and as soon as I was done recording the song, I went home, or I just went straight home from work and spent all my time editing my videos and adding people on MySpace and editing my videos more and writing stuff. So there was a time when I was kind of living out that sort of thing. I don't know. I still haven't heard what is it. You're right that some people could misinterpret Rand, but this reminds me of when. This reminds me of when I'm trying to kind of debate someone or trying to kind of sell them on objectivism, and they're their go-to is, yeah, but how will we explain this to people that they won't understand? And I'm saying, I can't even get you on board with this. So why are we worried about them? You're the one I'm trying to reach.
Well, I mean, you and I think, are largely on the same page on this. I mean, this is why we can.
I don't think so.
Okay, well, I think so. I'm saying this is something that I think is a common problem with Reading the Fountainhead, a problem that you yourself had, and a problem that I had. So none of what I just said is really debatable in that context. It doesn't take away the value of the Fountainhead. Doesn't mean she did something wrong. I'm just saying this is something people, especially at a young age, need to look out for. And I'm going to say something again. It is a misinterpretation, but to tell young people, which she's. Not having friends and being socially isolated is not an accomplishment. It's not healthy and it's not admirable. She's not saying that. I'm saying if that is the message you're getting from the Fountainhead, you're getting the wrong message. That's all I'm saying. But it's something that commonly happens, especially when you're young and bright, especially when and driven, when so many of your peers just want to have just banal lives. So that is something that happened to me and it happened to you.
Sort of, yes, as part of the growth process of trying to untangle all the BS that I was fed up until reading Rand. I don't know that this misinterpretation would be largely the case. If, like, for instance, if I have a child one day and if the child is interested in reading The Fountainhead, I'm not too worried about him misinterpreting, because if he has these questions, I imagine he might ask me. But this, I mean, do we agree that this is not? We're not discussing was Rand correct or not. We're discussing.
Correct. We're not. This is a the reader's response. That's not. I'm not saying she was arguing that this is admirable.
So what makes you bring this misreading of The Fountainhead up? What makes you bring this up when I asked you where you disagree with Rand? Because
if I said to Rand that reading Fountainhead has a common negative consequence, she would lose her shit.
I think for you to say that would be to be focusing on something negative that she can't really help.
If you're asking me where I disagree, then by definition I have to focus on something negative. I can't disagree about something positive.
So that's the extent of your disagreement with her philosophy? Is that somebody might misread The Fountainhead?
Yeah,
so
I told
it's
you
not
we're on the
in
same
her
page.
metaphysics.
No.
Then hold on. So you agree with her metaphysics?
Yes.
You agree with her epistemology?
Largely, yes.
What do you mean largely?
I mean, it's a very.
This is where
it's a very technical issue to epistemology. Epistemology, people don't know, is the study of how we know what we know. So it's very complicated and mind-numbing. So we're not getting into that. But yeah.
Well, we don't have to on your show, but I think this is where this relates to how she would come up with.
Here's another example. Here's another example of where I disagree with her. She's very insistent on the blank slate. And I do not, and she's and she's very insistent that there is a sharp divide as opposed to somewhat of a continuum between human beings and non-human animals. These are two things I disagree with her about. Like, for example, dogs have object permanence. And certain species we're finding have certain concepts of self through the mirror test and things like that.
But that's not something very primitive.
Correct.
They're very primitive compared to ours.
Absolutely.
So we're able to group things together in a way that organizes all these abstractions very economically. It's like hitting Command A and highlighting all these objects with a similarity in a way that a dog barely scratches the surface. So I don't think so. But as far as the blank slate, let's be very clear about this, because clarity are what we like to do on the Michael Malice program.
Do you even know what it's called?
When you say, you're welcome.
Okay, thank you.
Do you know what does the blank slate mean in your opinion? When you say the blank slate, what are you referring to?
What she says is that we do not have innate ideas, right? That all the ideas that we have in our minds are things that are come from data and perceptions, and through a process of reason or not using reason, it is made into concepts or incorrectly made into concepts and ideas. And I don't think that is entirely accurate.
Why do you say that?
Because there's lots of things that infants do, and lots of ideas that we have that she did not know child psychology. Child psychology was not a big thing at the time, but Steven Pinker has a whole book about the blank slate, and ideas that's not. And our brains also have built-in things that trick us. And that doesn't mean we can't work around them and be purely rational, but I don't think she addressed enough how many I don't want to say fail safes, but like evolutionary throwbacks we have in our minds and how they work. And Brandon, her protege at the time, he delved into it to some extent, but then they had a falling out, and objectivist psychology, kind of fell by the wayside.
So when you say your brain can trick you, is that the same as basically saying your senses of perception only give you a certain?
That is not the same as that.
So
I'm not saying like if you put a straw in a water and it's a curve that's a lie. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying things like cognitive dissonance. I am saying things like confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is a very good example. The fact that when people
what is it?
Confirmation bias is the idea that, like, let's suppose I read 10 articles and 5 of the articles are going to be about views that I already have, and 5 articles are going to be about views that I don't have and I disagree with. I'm going to be far more likely to accept the first 5 as true than the other 5, because that's just how human psychology works. And this is something that's well nigh universal. And obviously,
but the truth is still the truth.
Correct.
Right?
The truth is still the truth, and we can use reason to. This is something we have to look against, because this is a problem. But the fact is, this is something that is kind of programmed into our minds that we have to work around.
Right. So we have a certain biological nature, to be sure. I don't think Rand was saying you are born able to be God and just see the full truth in front of you,
sure,
unadulterated. Senses of perception themselves, you won't, like, your nose is only perceiving reality.
It's data.
Through
correct.
A certain
it's not knowledge. It's data.
Yeah. So when you say we have innate ideas, you mean what?
I mean,
what you're saying?
I mean, there are ways that the mind will work on its own, and the subconscious and things like that, which are far more complicated than simply, and not that she's really saying this per se, that if we just sit down and think things through, we're going to be able to derive truth. Because a lot of times, anxiety is another one. Anxiety is your brain telling you things that are not true and not in accordance with reality, based on, let's suppose, if you're hungry, you get resource scarcity. Rand discussed the female heroine of The Fountainhead, Dominique Franken, as herself in a bad mood, right? She said, "This is me in a bad mood." Well, mood is an example of not the blank slate. Mood is your brain kind of affecting how you feel that day and how you perceive reality, whether it's, oh, life is wonderful or life is terrible. That's not coming really from a rational place. That's coming from a pre-rational place. Like when we're hungry and we feel a certain way, that affects our thinking.
Yes, you could also be born without a sense of sight, but using your other senses and your conceptual faculty, you can discover the truth and you can overcome things like mood. What did you mention before mood?
I'm not, but the point is, hold on. The point is, the fact that mood exists is not exactly a function of the blank slate, because where's the mood coming from? It's not coming externally. It's coming internally.
I think so. Oh, you mentioned anxiety and
sure,
things like anxiety, and I think depression and addiction. Again, psychology being a very young field, very young science, corrupted almost in its conception both by bad philosophy.
Agreed.
But my opinion, as a guy who likes to think, is that the things like anxiety come from living with internal contradictions in your subconscious. I think Rand was very big on the subconscious. She did not dismiss it at all. She was very big on the fact there is a subconscious, which I think she explained as basically everything you're not currently thinking about consciously is basically kind of sitting in your subconscious. So if you have contradictory ideas, and probably the easiest that a Rand student could understand is that on one hand, you're explicitly told that altruism is the moral way of life, but implicitly you see that being rational and being selfish is the way to live, both in terms of your survival and in terms of attaining a life that you want. Now you're living with this contradiction. On one hand, you've got altruism telling you that it's all about sacrifice for other people. That's the moral ideal. On the other hand, you've got the practical wants and needs. So you're now living with a contradiction. That's in the realm of ethics. In the realm of knowledge, you've got, on one hand, you implicitly know your whole life, since you were basically a baby, that thinking, assessing reality, perceiving and conceptualizing and using reason is the way to discover truth. On the other hand, you are being told constantly that no, your consciousness is distorting reality. Your consciousness is creating reality. Your consciousness is an illusion. It's not even there. All these philosophical contradictions are now living inside of your subconscious, and I think that's where anxiety comes from. So to begin with anxiety as an example of why we're not born a blank slate, I don't think is correct. I think we are born with the capability of avoiding anxiety forever, but it's going to take a lot of work to undo the damage of irrational philosophy.
I mean, I think that again, that is the blank slate argument, that everything that is that anxiety is a consequence is a function of what you garbage in, garbage out, right? Is kind of the programming equivalent. I remember very recently, my coach had me doing carb cycling and intermittent fasting as a way to lose lower body fat, right? And at a certain point, when your glycogen gets depleted, as I had, I was having profoundly irrational thoughts, and all it took was a candy bar to get back to my sense of self. I don't see how that can be ascribed to bad philosophy. That's clearly a physiological thing happening.
Again, you're starting with an adult man who, in my opinion, is living with philosophical contradictions and has been for a long time and is dealing with a certain crisis right now.
What crisis was I dealing with?
You said you were feeling a certain way, and then the candy bar brought you back to feeling okay.
Right. But so I wasn't literally in crisis. That's the whole point. This was a rational thought. My brain was telling me I'm in crisis, but as soon as I had some carbs, I was fine, because the reality is I wasn't in crisis at all.
Right. So look, I mean, it is possible that like certain cases of anxiety or things like that are just purely biological. Again, this is a new science, psychology and psychiatry. But I think by and large, as someone who has been on both sides of this, as someone who in my younger years was very much considered myself depressed, as someone who has struggled with addiction, as someone who, I wouldn't say anxiety is a big theme in my life, but I've definitely had to overcome it and deal with it. It's my opinion that philosophy is a major factor. So it's
I'm not disagreeing with that.
So it's never scientific to begin with an adult person, even if that adult is Ayn Rand in a bad mood, and say, "Oh, look, see, we're not a blank slate." You really need to put a certain amount of have some patience for kind of the future of what'll be discovered about psychology, but. I think everything Rand says.
We're talking past each other. There's two types of anxiety. There's anxiety.
I can't hear you now.
Can you hear me now? Is this okay?
Now I can.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's two types of anxiety. There's something where it's basically happened to you every day, and this is your kind of way of life, right? And in which case, I agree with you. If you sit down and think things through and have cognitive restructuring, that's the way to deal with that. And the fact that people are being medicated as their first approach, as opposed to being like, well, maybe if you made some changes, blah, blah, blah. And my friends in recovery and lots of the things that she said are just profoundly compatible with objectivism or just rationality, and giving, not only is it helpful in terms of fighting these bad thoughts, it's also helpful in giving you the sense of you do have the control of your life to kind of regain that driver's wheel. So there's that kind of anxiety, which I agree with you completely. But I'm also saying that on a day-to-day, sometimes, like I was just saying, hunger feeds into this, or we sometimes will have these spikes of anxiety or depression, which you just said as well, are physiological. They're not coming from a like what you were talking about, where it's just basically taking over your life. Let me ask you another question. One of the things Rand was one of the working titles of the Fountainhead was Secondhand Lives. And the premise of the Fountainhead is that every artist, to be a quality artist, should be an originator, should be have integrity. As she says, a building has integrity just like a man and just as seldom, right? But so many of you, what would Rand think of your videos when all of your videos are, I'm not using this term in a pejorative sense, derivative of other people's videos?
I think that's like asking, how can Rourke use rules of architecture, rules of mathematics that he didn't come up with? How could Rand write in English, which a language she did not invent? I know there are some differences we can analyze between those examples and mine,
sure.
But I think that's an interesting question, by the way. I think so. Parody. I think in one respect, a song parody is saying, here's what this song might have been, or here's what this song could be relating to this particular topic. So maybe that's one thing, but it's clearly creative. It doesn't write itself.
Sure.
Somebody needs to focus and create. I mean, if along with her opinion of like horror novels, she maybe would have considered parody and spoofs to be not impressive, that would certainly be her opinion that I would not share. But I think if she was as integrated as I suspect she was, based on the magnificent work she's created, I think she might surprise people by having a certain level of respect for what I do, even if she disapproved of the raunchiness of it.
Yeah. Did you ever watch her on Donahue and on Mike Wallace?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's some of the best stuff ever. Wait, so did you actually have to come out to people as an objectivist, or did all your friends know as the process going along?
Look, I have, I guess, friends who still don't. I mean, it's not something that like I bring up very often, I guess, depending on who it is. If I'm hanging out with somebody who's kind of shares my interest in like social media and stuff, it probably will never come up. If I'm at a politics event, which I don't do often, but like supposedly, hypothetically, if I found myself at like Politicon this year, that would be something I would get into a conversation with somebody about. But when I said like come out as an objectivist, I mean like, going on Sargon's show, going on Rubin's show, and basically talking about these things. Whereas beforehand, it was kind of a personal hobby, a personal interest that I only really shared with other objectivists that I had met over the years.
Michael Malice here, and I'm going to tell you about Heshi Socks. This episode's sponsored by Heshi Socks, HESHISocks.com. They gave me a pair to try on because you guys know how I am with the clothes. I'm wearing them right now. They're absolutely awesome. It's like wearing slippers on your feet. I've never had socks like these. Typical socks provide no protection and cause your feet to hurt if you're wearing nice shoes, or they're expensive. Here's what Heshi Socks makes different. They cut out the middleman. You get socks that are cushioned in the footbed, heel and toe with maximum comfort. I'm telling you, it's like pillows for the feet. Like they have that written here, but I'm actually wearing them. It's amazing. You have that pair of socks that you walk around your house in? That would be these. Or to sleep in. It's just so comfortable. There's arch support in the center of the foot. It's made with high-end Pima cotton. It's really, really, really soft. Antimicrobial, so the feet don't smell, and they've got a bunch of different styles. But the most important thing is I sat here doing this whole show wearing these Heshi socks. If you go to HeshiSocks.com, HESHI Socks.com, and use promo code WELCOME30, you get 30% off. 30%. HeshiSocks.com. You will be telling me you're welcome. So we're about to tease your we're going to add your upcoming video in a second. But last question. When I met Yaron Brook at FEE, the Foundation for Economic Education, this is actually how my upcoming book on the New Right starts, is Yaron Brook at FEE, because Rand had FEE was the first libertarian think tank, started in the 1940s. And at one point, Milton Friedman and George Stigler, or Stiglitz, I always get them confused, wrote an essay called Roofs or Ceilings, and talking about rent control and saying how rent control causes housing shortages, blah, blah, blah. Rand wrote a letter in all caps to Leonard Reed, the head of FEE, which meant she was holding on the shift key on her keyboard, saying like, this is the worst thing ever put out by, like literally she said, worst thing ever put out free market education. Why would you hire two Reds, meaning Friedman and Stigler, and comparing them to Stalin? Because her point is, once you say that housing is up for the government to kind of adjudicate how it wants, you've completely given up proper rights, so on and so forth. So for a long time, there was this divide between the Rand Circle and FEE. So when Yaron Brook, head of the Ayn Rand Institute, came to speak, it was kind of this big rapprochement. It was great. And when I met him there, I asked him if he had read the recent book on Rand, Ayn Rand and the World She Made by Jennifer, I'm blanking the woman's name, Ann Conover Heller. And he said, I'm more interested in Rand's philosophy than I am in her biography. Do you share that opinion?
Yeah, I tend to, like I've said in this conversation, I'm much more interested in her ideas and what they can mean to me, much more than the details of her life. If she happened to fall short of living by these ideas, that's unfortunate and sad, but that doesn't negate the truth of what she discovered, in my opinion. Sure,
absolutely.
But I'm not.
Go ahead.
Did you want to? Are we moving on to a new topic, or should I respond to this?
No, please.
Or was that the end of that?
That was going to be the end.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure Yaron Brook should have even been at FEE. I'm a much more old school about objectivists being cozy with libertarians. And as you can see by our conversation, I want to focus on our differences, and I want to embellish the fact that the difference between you and I is not anarchism versus limited government. It does stem from epistemology. It does stem from the lower branches of philosophy, in my opinion. And if objectivists are going to go to a fee conference, I think it should be to highlight the differences. In my opinion, I was invited to speak at a future fee conference, but to speak about entrepreneurship and success, and I'm considering doing it to speak about that specific topic. But if I were to go there as a representative of objectivism, I think I would be I would either not go, or I would go with the intention of saying, like, look, I'm going to go there to highlight the differences between libertarianism versus what it is that Rand was talking about.
Well, I don't call myself a libertarian. I would say anarchist. So according to her, so you would agree that I'm a bigger threat to liberty than, let's say, like Bernie Sanders?
That's not something I am comfortable giving an answer with, because I don't know. I'm not good at like assessing who's a bigger threat than whom. I think philosophically, sort of. I don't know. I like Bernie Sanders. He's a politician. You're like more of a thinker in our society. I don't see you or anyone as a threat so much. I see the weakness in objectivists who won't clearly identify and explain the difference in ideas. So a lot of people, they don't see a difference between you and me, or they don't see a difference between Rothbard and Rand in any meaningful way. They say, sure, they're both free market people. These are the important things to really understand and explain.
Well, I mean, like here's another example of that, though. In 1964, Goldwater had a huge election debacle, and she said with a straight face that if Goldwater ran a more philosophical campaign, he would have won. Now, to me, that seems absolutely crazy. I can't. Anytime you're trying to preach philosophy in a soundbite culture, it's going to blow up in your face, especially as a presidential candidate.
So I don't know if the culture back then was as retarded as the one we currently have. So it is possible that in that decade, in the 60s, whenever that was, that Goldwater, yeah. I think what she meant to say is that if Goldwater spoke of principles a bit more clearly, I think people might rise to the occasion. And we see that with guys like Bernie. I mean, I hate his principles, but the fact he uses them resonates with people. That's what I was.
But he lost. Yeah. He also lost.
He got a lot of enthusiasm, and I think the fact that
so did Goldwater.
Right, but it has been said that Hillary lost because Bernie lost. In essence, people were not enthusiastic about Hillary, but not so much the point right now. But I think what Rand was saying was, if Goldwater was more philosophical and understood the roots of why liberty ought to be fought for, if he understood it and explained it a bit more philosophically, that would resonate with people and inspire them. And you may say I'm a dreamer, but I tend to agree with that. I don't think people are as dumb as we sometimes think. I think they come off as dumb because the menu of ideas they have been presented with contains a lot of stupid shit, and they have many of them, they're not even aware of a more rational option.
Well, in that case, you and I completely part company on this one, because I think think people are profoundly stupid. The last question.
There it is. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do you think
cynicism?
It's not cynicism. No, it's not cynicism. Cynicism is thinking that people will always make the bad choice. I do not think that. I'm very much think cynicism is the enemy. My other favorite philosopher is Camus, who always looked for the hope and inspiration. So I think cynicism is I think probably the most dangerous philosophical worldview. If you think people are dumb and don't expect them to act other than that way, that's not cynical. That's just saying, why are you having... Because then if you're not cynical, if you think that they're brilliant and then they don't act brilliantly, you're going to condemn them as opposed to taking them for what they are. You have to look at any and just because someone's unintelligent, I'm short, doesn't make me a bad person. Just means I'm not tall. If someone's unintelligent, doesn't make them Rand talked to us very clearly all the time. If someone's not talented or not bright, they're not in any sense immoral or inferior to somebody else. They still have to live a life to their own integrity. So I want to be clear on that. Go ahead.
So if I could make one point here, is that just as earlier I said, you can't look at an adult dealing with anxiety and derive from that arguments against the blank slate.
Sure.
I would also say you can't look at people today in a culture that has been influenced by philosophers who were committed against reason, and people today who were educated to compartmentalize and not to integrate, educated not to be rational. You can't look at people today and say that's humanity, that's human nature, or that's a rule that we can't overcome. I think you're a fan of Alexander Hamilton.
Yes,
I think
sir.
in those days, people were so much more poetic and literate. The level of literacy and interest in philosophy and ideas was at a much higher rate, certainly at least among the founding fathers, than like
correct.
politicians.
Correct. 1,000%
okay.
true. But at the same time,
and the fact that the
Boston
founding
Tea
fathers were able to,
the Boston Tea Party was a riot. I mean, these were lowlifes.
So that's all you see it as.
No, hold on. No, hold on. I'm not saying that they're lowlifes. Thaddeus Russell wrote a great book about renegade history of the United States. Just because someone is low class, those low class people are the ones who often are biggest freedom fighters because they have nothing to lose. Not everyone is always philosophically driven and then she doesn't say this either. People could be philosophically driven on a kind of visceral level. They don't have to sit down and read Aristotle or John Locke. They still at that time did have a much stronger conception of rights, the nature of government, so on and so forth. I'm not disagreeing with that. What I'm saying is, you had the erudite founding fathers, but you also had the trash. And I'm not using that in a pejorative sense, the people at the bottom, but the people at the bottom were the ones who were like, screw this. We're actually doing something about this. We're not going to take it anymore. We're not going to be under the boot of the crown. And that's who fought in the Revolutionary War. Sure, there were people at the top who were wealthy, but then you had people who were marching without boots and they were glad to do it because they're like, we're fighting for our principles.
Yes. Okay. Let me. I mean, there's so much we can argue about the American Revolution, but I just want to say there are different eras. There are eras where people show higher levels of intelligence, and then there are eras when people all seem to be stupid. Like today, you look at our culture today, and you can say, how did people this dumb ever even invent the wheel? And then you can look at even just a couple decades ago and say, wow, people were not as dumb back then, or maybe you would disagree with that. But I think,
would disagree.
like we mentioned like 1964. I think there was a much more kind of civil. Anyway, I think ideas are the motor of history. Have you read a book called The Ominous Parallels by Leonard Peikoff? I imagine you might have because
I have the hardcover with Death Jacket from 1984.
It's amazing to me. So but what's also amazing to me is that you don't believe in the power of ideas.
Then, no. Don't put words in my mouth. I believe profoundly in the power of ideas, but like Rand always said history is made by elites and small groups. And they're the ones who move things. She said this explicitly, and I agree with that.
Intellectuals.
Yes. So
the intellectuals.
Yes.
But the trash are presented with a menu.
Yes.
The trash are presented with a menu. So what that menu contains is ultimately going to be put by the intellectuals.
Correct, 100%.
If the intellectuals have an enlightenment and they really, really start to believe in reason and they start to present that as an option to the trash, I think you would start to see the trash elevate themselves up to a sort of a mid-level, kind of a Rucka Rucka level of intelligence, as opposed to more of a KSI level of retardation. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Okay, here's the last question. If you're let's talk.
Okay.
If you're talking about philosophy, do you think if Goldwater or any presidential candidate ran as an atheist that they could be elected?
Probably not, because the culture is not into that, right? That's like asking, could they run as a laissez-faire capitalist and win? No, not yet.
No, correct, not absolutely not. So
right.
we're completely on the same page. So are you still, after 10 plus years? Mm-hmm. Does your work still, this is the most important Randian question. Does your work still bring you happiness and joy?
Oh yeah. Oh, more than ever.
Why
because I'm happier. Well, I'm happier today than ever. I'm more integrated. I'm more comfortable in my own skin now than ever. I'm having more fun than ever. I'm enjoying my work more. I'm working on more things. I have more fun with people, I don't know. I just, as you get older, if you're doing the right things, if you're being rational, if you're really introspecting and working on yourself, then you get better with age and you get cooler with age. Yeah. And to bring up one important part of life, girls find you more attractive, kind of like, there's like more girls for you to pick from because like you're getting a little bit older, but there's like more girls to pick from. Whereas
Yeah.
when you were like in your early 20s, the girls your age, they're all looking at older guys, and
you have
there's almost
stature.
nobody.
There's stature now.
And you have stature and confidence, and when you're younger, you're still kind of figuring out what you're doing with your life and all that. So the older you get, but if you're doing the wrong thing, if you're being a grimy neckbeard piece of shit and afraid of the world and blaming the world for your problems and not pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone, then age is a curse. Then with every passing day and every passing year, you become that creepy guy that nobody gets and no one wants to be near. So be very, very careful when choosing what kind of person you want to be, kids, because these are two very different roads you can go down.
And I just one more point about you know being in recovery. I think that is such a great thing for so many people because they get to basically start over and be like, holy crap, I'm not a lost cause. And I'm not too old to kind of find the joy in life. And I think that's one of the big issues with people who are addicts is they think, well, I've had my chance. It's like, no. Every day is a chance. It could start today and you could achieve wonderful things. I don't care if you're 30, 40, 50, 60. And I think that's ties into very much with Rand. It's like your life is this great, great treasure that you have. And just, it's right in front of you. Just take it. So I mean, Rucka, it's always great talking to you. We're going to have, when we're in the same city, some kind of debate and sell tickets on one of these philosophical issues. I think people would really, really get into it.
I mean, we can do that in person. We can do that again online. I mean, I love talking to you. And
it's so much more fun in person than where there's two podiums and then you make it a whole show and blah, blah, blah. Do you know what I mean?
Of course.
That kind of thing.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I love being able to take it to the lower levels of philosophy. So we're not arguing about something superficial. We're arguing about what I consider to be meaningful. And that people, if they take one thing away from this conversation, they should see a connection between epistemology and personal happiness. There is a direct relationship between the way you view your ability to reason and be rational and your personal happiness and pleasure.
And now we're going to end with a little clip from Rucka's forthcoming video. What's it called?
Kim and I.
Oh, you're hit. So that's another thing we have in common. Us and our utter loathing and contempt for the North Korean government, and also our use of humor in very different ways to cast disparagement on this worst of all nations.
I don't endorse deriving value judgments typically from my work. So I don't generally like people looking at my thing and saying, oh, he hates North Korea because he made fun of North Korea. But I do, you are correct in saying that I very much am not a fan of what they're doing. And I do not approve of North Korea.
Yeah. Okay. Talk soon, my friend.
Yeah. Peace.
Thank you.
I am Trump, a smart guy. So good clothes at Macy's line. This kid is cool, and I am fly. We're good friends, Kim and I. Cause my dick's a good size. Kim Jong-un's amazing guy. His small dick, smaller than mine. We're good friends, Kim and I. Kim and I'm the new Kim Jong. I'm the head of the tribe. Drop a nuclear bomb on the head of the tide. There could be just one Korea at a time. When South Korea get the idea, oh, will one of us die?